hey, I read War and Peace. It took me about 2.5 months, and I was actually kind of surprised about this book. This is definitely one of these things that I think if you're a reader, it's like you hear about War and Peace. It's one of those books where it's like, oh, that is literature. That is one of those high summits. And, it's one of these things of like, I always like meant to get around to. I have read later work of his, Anna Karenina, read, very short stories, novellas, stuff like that. But, it's like War and Peace. Oh, bro, dude, that's the big one. So, I happened to get a deal, ebook. God, thank God for getting an ebook. Of the Richard Prevere and Larissa Wolonsky translation for, I think, like something ridiculous like $5 or less. $5 Canadian, so it's really cheap. Which put the ebook version of this 1,296 page translation into my hands, into my hot little hands, and I finally got around to it. And I just like to chat about it because there's definitely some surprising things here. This is a book that was, I guess it was first serially published in 1865, and then it was entirely rewritten and published as in its book version in 1968 or 69. Looking at publishing dates is always kind of slightly difficult. This is the 2007 translation, so it's relatively recent. It seems like it's an okay translation. I probably, if I was going to reread this again at some point, I would probably check out some of the other ones just to see. I don't think I haven't developed a strong emotional attachment to the particular language of this one. I think they do a fairly good job. We'll get into some of the choices, but some of those choices you can translate, you can go back to the beginning. So yes, this is a historical novel because yes, while it was, initially published in 1865, this is all about the Napoleonic French invading Russia in sort of the 1812 is like when the main action happens, but a little bit before and then a while after, and then for a while, and like 1812, 1813, and then there's a jump in time at the very end. But it's that. So it's a historical novel. And definitely it being historical novel comes very much into the fore in this book. It is got a whole bunch. I think everyone I've heard talk about this has got it's got a whole ton of untranslated French in it. Yes, and that's Tolstoy himself published it with French. He was expecting his readership to be able to read French even at this point in the history. I mean, it's sort of a plot point that the upper crust of Russian society are all French speakers and communicate quite a bit in French, and now they're being invaded by France. And how does that shift as the novel goes along? I think Tolstoy himself may have published it without the French at one point, then put it back in again. You'd have to talk to someone who knows about stuff. For my purposes, reading this, it was kind of annoying because they also do not translate the French. I kind of yearn that they just put it in italics to indicate that it was French, because every time I'm a Canadian. Yes, maybe I'm theoretically supposed to be bilingual. I have crappy 10th grade French, which was a long time ago. So every time French, and there's a lot of it in here, I had to click the link and then read it and then click back and click forward and back and click forward and back and forward and back and forward and back, which was tedious. And it was just, I longed for an option of just you just hit a button and it just translated it all into English and left it in the main text. That would have been nice. That is a common complaint about this book. The other one would be, oh my God, all the characters, all the Russian names. I had a little bit of this with Anna Karenina. Anna Karenina was a lot easier because there's sort of some main core characters in that. That book is more focused in it. Has less of a wide scope than War and Peace, spoiler. So you're able to settle into it. I found after 300 or 400 pages. I had everyone down that I was going to need, or else they had gotten pruned away. So that was a difficulty that I didn't mind. Now, the thing that really surprised me about this book was that, oh my God, this is that it's like it. The thing that really surprised me was that I went into this thinking this was just going to be a book of fiction. And I mean, I'd heard Tolstoy say, oh, he didn't really consider it a novel, but you expect that from artists. They'll say things kind of like, oh, I don't really consider this to be my novel. That would be Anna Karenina. And then I get into the novel and go, oh, yes, actually Tolstoy had a point, because in this book of historical fiction, there is sections which are very much like a history book. This is like there are sections in here were very much like it switches to history book text, where it wouldn't be out of place in a textbook from history. And then we have Tolstoy arguing with historians about their interpretation of events, and also, yeah, that sort of thing. And the kind of the key thing in all this, because some of the characters in this book are historical figures. It is historical fiction, and it's got them in it. I mean, the main dramatic characters are made up or amalgams of stuff, but Napoleon shows up in the book. Alexander the First, the Tsar of Russia. There's the notable generals, the field commander, Kutsov, he shows up in this book, and that surprised me, because it was like, oh, this is Tolstoy, and it's going to be the kind of the great men of history. I have this kind of, whenever I think of War and Peace, I think of the giant portraits of Napoleon and kind of like majestic battles, and it's going to be all that. And while the characters, the fictional characters in this book start off the novel were hero worshipping these figures, the war, the very kind of realistic, brutal, chaotic, senseless war, quickly knocks that out of them. And you also discover that Tolstoy himself thinks that the great man of history idea is bullshit. That it's sort of like you're looking down on all these people like they're ants. And, it's historical movements. It's suddenly at some point, all these human beings decided to move west. And then there was a thing and they all moved east again. And it's that kind of swing. It's you're looking down at ants doing stuff. And it's definitely coming from the point of view of saying, like, look, if you used your magnifying glass and you looked down and you saw this one ant that seemed to be with a hat, and it's like, that's the Napoleon ant. If you said, like, oh, there's a Napoleon ant that's directing all this, you'd think that was silly. And it's equally as silly, he feels, for the movements of history, for the causation. Napoleon, at some point he says in the book that just like, well, okay, Napoleon didn't actually have any more influence on the movement of all these people than any individual soldier in the thing. So, and he gets into very much kind of causation of arguing with historians about like how, they think that like it was a great plan that the Russians lured the French deeper and deeper and deeper into France, stretched them out. And this was all some kind of a cunning plan, when he says, no, if you look at the actual record and stuff like that, this was all a series of mistakes, of arguments. People did not want this to happen. When you look at how the generals, whether it's Napoleon or kind of just specific generals, kind of trying to point their troops at anything, it's the idea of like, look, it's hard to organize 3 people for like, beer night. It's impossible to organize or to actually kind of, make, 10,000 people, 10,000 troops with all intricate parts and complicated things, for everyone to meet up at the right time, to do precise actions of like military stuff. Just the chaos, the fog of war, he's really good at. So we get this like this grand overview, this godlike view, and it's a view of human beings as kind of as just kind of all these individual chaotic parts going, and it's and just like how senseless and brutal the war is, how a lot of the young male characters go into it going like, I'm going to be great and I'm going to be a hero, and they just fall on their asses. Some of them get killed. Some of them get horribly wounded. It does not go well. He also is really good at depicting the civilians and their suffering and the brutality that way. It's like how much of like, it's War and Peace, but you expect me, it's an older book, it's going to kind of glorify war. It's like, no, it is not. So there's all that. I did say like at the beginning, there's like an onslaught of characters, but we really kind of zoom in to people. So, where there's like Anna Karenina and, Levin in Anna Karenina. Levin actually, I think, is the main character in that book, not Anna Karenina. But we do get characters like Prince Andrei, Natasha, and Pierre. Pierre, who also seems to be kind of this maybe a self-insert character of Tolstoy. Again, a fairly dominant character in this book. Tolstoy himself, his voice is very much dominant in this book. He is a guy, he reminds me of sort of kind of like our science fiction fellow Robert A. Heinlein, who really liked to expound in his books, and you get that same, it really goes into spades that way later in the thing where Tolstoy is expounding. I mean, he's a great expounder. At least I find him for like, historical stuff. I think this is one of these books where the more of a history geek you are, the more you enjoy reading history, enjoy the fights between historians. The more you'll enjoy that part of the book. I mean, he is also, he's Tolstoy. He's great at the human drama. Just no one writes about dying better than Tolstoy. The experience, the physical death of the body. How someone kind of their spirit or whatever kind of animates them can go long before the actual meat dies. It's just like there's so much of that in this book. I think I'm not that much of a fan of him when it comes to women in his book. Like I said with Anna Karenina, I always relitigate that book. Maybe that's a book I have to read again, but I always felt like Levin was the character that was treated far more fairly and interestingly in that book than Anna herself. There's sort of a kind of a childlike or kind of looking down on female characters. I feel like I get with Tolstoy, especially kind of the character of Natasha in this reading of it. So, he's very much a patriarchal guy, I guess, in that sense of the word. So interesting. I mean, yeah. So that is the whole book up until the epilogue. And I actually did a little stop. I did a stop and I did a little talk to myself about the book up until that point. Like, okay, I've read everything up until this point. Now I've got the epilogue, which will probably take me another week or two. And I'm glad I stopped then, because then at the end of this book, without any spoilers, we get the epilogue. There's a jump forward. We get about the characters. There's kind of a good thing of continuation of the characters in peace. What is peace? There's still all the fractiousness. There's still all the conflict, dysfunctional family and all that stuff. And then at the end of War and Peace, there's a section that if I hit it if this section had come near the beginning of the book, I might have DNF'd it. But at the end, near the end of this almost 1,300 page novel, there is the final bit of this book. The second part of this epilogue is a hunk of philosophy. It is, we've dropped all fiction, and then it's just a philosophical dissertation at the end of this book. And I'm not a giant, I'm good with my history. I'm even good with my meta history about kind of arguing about causation. This gets into real nuts and bolts of being a philosophical work. And it's just like going around, to my mind, going around and around in circles. I know that, later in life, Tolstoy kind of dropped the fiction and did write philosophical works, was very influential with people like Gandhi and stuff like that. So I'm not going to dismiss it. I'm just going to say, wow, that really hit a brick wall for me. It's one of these things of like, if I hadn't read the entirety of the book up until that point, I would have really been tempted to just DNF it. I did read it, but you know, in one ear, in my eyes, just out again. I'm sure you could put a gun to my head. Maybe I'd talk about causation. I don't know what I would talk about if I was going to talk about this section. I'd have to reread it again. It's one of those really jarring things where you've got like one kind of writing and then suddenly you hit something that's just like completely different, and it stuns your expectations. Maybe if I read this section just on its own, I'd be able to kind of get stuff out of it. But having kind of gone through all this kind of like a historical fiction, historical epic, you know, thing, you can't call War and Peace epic. I don't know what you can. But then to hit this philosophical treatise, it was just like, what the hell? What the hell, Tolstoy? That really surprised me. But you know, in conclusion of the thing, it's like, yes, I'm a slow reader. This took me like 2.5 months to read. And as Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse talked about for his March of the Mammoths kind of celebration of mammoth books and getting into them, there's nothing like being with a work that long of like really sinking in and getting to be with these characters, be in this world for that kind of a length of time that is so immersive in a way that nothing can kind of compete with. That kind of length of time, that kind of depth, that kind of intensity, you cannot beat it. So, you know, as much as I complained about that last section, which really kind of tossed me out of that immersion, that was like, oh my God, I'm on this. I am now listening to Tolstoy give me a philosophical lecture, which is like, I did not sign up for this. I guess I did sign up for this because I got the book, but it's like that just like getting sunk into that was just beautiful. So, you know, I'm cranky about parts of this book. There's, you know, but overall, wow. I just wanted to kind of give myself a record of this first reading of War and Peace, that it is a gnarly, odd book. And you get this kind of pedestal thing where it's like, oh, it's just a monument and it sits up there. It's like, no, take it down off the shelves, experience and realize just how fucking weird this book is. How odd and individual, and you know, it's God, this is Tolstoy. This, like, wow, you get a sense of the guy, and the guy is a difficult guy, and that is the joy of literature. I got to spend 2.5 months with this guy, and that was amazing. That was amazing. That was a gift. That is, so, you know, thank you to the translators of this book, Pavir and Volonsky, for bringing that to me. Yes, I'm probably not going to come back to your particular translation again, but wow, that was a great start. So I'm going to leave it there. More videos later.